We know you guys love these stories, but most of you listening aren't subscribing. Our subs have been quite low this month, and we're really close to 20,000 subscribers, so please be a legend and smash the subscribe button. And like this video, it will really help support us. Thank you so much.
I'd never thought my ex would become my worst nightmare at work. It started when Harry got hired at my company. At first, I couldn't believe it was happening. What were the odds? I tried to be professional, to ignore the knot in my stomach every time I saw him in the hallway. Harry acted like everything was normal, always polite and friendly. But I knew better. I could see the glint in his eye, the hidden smirk when no one else was looking. The first incident seemed innocent enough. Harry accidentally deleted an important file I needed for a presentation. I had to scramble to recreate it, making me look unprepared in front of my boss. Harry apologized profusely, but I saw right through his act. As weeks went by, more accidents kept happening. My emails would mysteriously disappear. My calendar would get messed up, causing me to miss meetings. Each time, Harry was there to help, looking like the office hero while I appeared incompetent. I tried to tell my coworkers about my suspicions, but they just laughed it off. Harry? No way. He's such a nice guy, they'd say. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I imagining things? Was I just being paranoid? But then I started noticing other little things. How Harry always seemed to be nearby when I was talking to colleagues. How he'd casually bring up topics in meetings that made me look bad. It was subtle, but I knew what he was doing. I decided to start keeping a record of everything. Every mistake. Every coincidence. Every time Harry was involved in making me look bad. It was hard to prove anything concrete, but I needed to feel like I was doing something. One day, I overheard Harry talking to our boss about a big project I've been working on for months. He was taking credit for my ideas, presenting them as his own. I was furious, but when I tried to speak up, Harry smoothly talked over me, making me sound petty and jealous. I went home that night feeling defeated. How could I fight against someone who was so skilled at manipulation? Harry had everyone fooled. He was charming, hardworking, and always ready to lend a hand. No one would believe me if I told them what was really going on. But I refused to give up. I started coming in early and staying late, double-checking everything I did. I backed up all my files and kept meticulous records of my work. It was exhausting, but I was determined not to let Harry win. As time went on, Harry's tactics became bolder. He started forgetting to invite me to important meetings. He'd send emails with incorrect information, making it look like I was the one making mistakes. Every time I tried to defend myself, he'd play the victim, making me seem aggressive and unstable. My work started to suffer. I was constantly on edge, second-guessing everything I did. My colleagues began to avoid me, whispering behind my back. I could feel my dream job slipping away, all because of Harry's twisted game. One night, working late, I stumbled upon something strange. Harry had left his computer unlocked, a rookie mistake for someone usually so careful. Curiosity got the better of me, and I looked at his screen. What I saw made my blood run cold. Harry had a folder filled with information about me. Old emails, personal photos, even a detailed schedule of my daily routine. This wasn't just workplace mess. This was full-on stalking. I quickly took photos of what I saw, my hands shaking. Finally, I had proof. But what could I do with it? Would anyone believe me? Or would Harry find a way to twist this too, making me look like the crazy ex who couldn't let go? I spent days agonizing over what to do. I was scared of confronting Harry directly, not knowing how he might react. Going to HR felt risky. What if they sided with Harry? He was so well liked in the office. In the end, I decided to confide in Sarah, a coworker I trusted. To my relief, she believed me. She'd noticed some odd things about Harry too, but hadn't put it all together. With Sarah's support, I felt stronger. We came up with a plan. Sarah would help me gather more evidence, watching Harry when I couldn't. We'd document everything, building a solid case before going to management. For weeks, we worked in secret. It was nerve-wracking, knowing that one wrong move could alert Harry to what we were doing. But slowly, we accumulated proof of his manipulations. The turning point came during a big presentation. Harry had messed up my slides, replacing key data with incorrect information. But this time I was prepared. I had backups ready and smoothly switched to the correct version. Harry's face when he realized his plan had failed was priceless. For a moment, his mask slipped, and everyone saw a glimpse of his true nature. It was subtle, but it planted seeds of doubt in our colleagues' minds. Emboldened by this small victory, Sarah and I decided it was time to act. We took our evidence to our boss in HR, laying out the whole story. At first, they were skeptical, but as we showed them proof after proof, their expressions changed from disbelief to shock. An investigation was launched. Harry, of course, denied everything, playing the role of the wrongly accused victim. But this time, his act didn't work. Too many inconsistencies had been revealed. As word spread through the office, others came forward with their own stories about Harry. It turned out I wasn't the only one he'd been manipulating. He'd just been more focused on me because of our history. The day Harry was escorted out of the building was surreal. I felt a mix of relief, vindication, and lingering fear. Would this really be the end? Or would he find some way to retaliate? In the weeks that followed, I struggled to adjust to the new normal. My colleagues apologized for not believing me, but trust was slow to rebuild. I jumped at every unexpected email, half expecting to see Harry's name. But gradually, things improved. I threw myself into my work, determined to reclaim my reputation. Sarah and I became close friends, bonded by our shared experience. One day, months later, I received a message from an unknown number. My heart raced as I opened it, fearing it was Harry. Instead, it was from another of his ex-girlfriends. She had heard about what happened and wanted to thank me for exposing him. As I read her message, I realized something. By standing up to Harry, I hadn't just saved my own career. I'd potentially saved others from going through the same nightmare. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly proud of myself. The experience had changed me. I was stronger now, more cautious, but also more confident. I knew I could handle whatever came my way. Harry had tried to destroy me, but in the end, he only made me more resilient. As I looked around my office, at the colleagues who now respected me, at the work I loved, I smiled. Harry was gone, but I was still here, thriving. And that was the best revenge of all. I never thought I'd be that person with a crazy ex story, but here I am living it. It all started after I broke up with Dan. We'd been together for 2 years and things had been good at first. But over time, he became controlling and possessive. I finally gathered the courage to end it. I moved into a new apartment, hoping for a fresh start. At first, everything seemed fine. I was enjoying my newfound freedom and the peace of living alone. But then little things started happening. I'd come home and feel like something was off. Like someone had been there. A book slightly out of place. A chair moved an inch to the left. Tiny things that made me question my sanity. I started feeling watched. The hairs on the back of my neck would stand up for no reason. I'd be in the shower and suddenly get the urge to peek behind the curtain. Even when I was alone, I felt eyes on me. I tried to shake it off. Told myself I was being paranoid, but the feeling wouldn't go away. One night, I woke up suddenly, heart racing. I could have sworn I heard breathing in my room. I turned on the light, but no one was there. I checked every closet, under the bed, behind the curtains. Nothing. I changed the locks on my doors. Blocked Dan's number and all his social media. But still the feeling persisted. I started noticing other weird things. Sometimes I'd come home and my computer would be on, even though I was sure I'd turned it off. Or I'd find a mug in the sink that I didn't remember using. I became jumpy. Every little noise made me flinch. I started sleeping with the lights on, a baseball bat by my bed. My friends told me I was overreacting, that I was letting the breakup get to me. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was losing it. But then came the night that changed everything. I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth in front of the bathroom mirror. As I leaned in to spit, I noticed something odd in the corner of the mirror. A tiny red light blinking steadily. My heart stopped. I reached up, hands shaking, and pried at the edge of the mirror. It came away easily, revealing a small camera hidden behind it. I felt sick. How long had it been there? Who put it there? Deep down, I knew the answer. In a frenzy, I started searching the apartment. I found cameras everywhere. In the light fixtures, behind picture frames, even in the smoke detector. It hit me then. Dan had been watching me this whole time. He'd installed these cameras long before we broke up, probably when he still had a key to my old place. I called the police. They came and documented everything. Took the cameras as evidence, but they couldn't do much else. There was no proof it was Dan, and he had an alibi for the times I'd been out of the apartment. I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend. But even there, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next few weeks were a blur. I moved again to a place Dan had never been. I got a restraining order against him, even though he denied everything. But the damage was done. I couldn't trust my own home anymore. Couldn't relax in my own space. Every time I entered a room, I found myself scanning for hidden cameras. One night, about a month after moving to my new place, I woke up to a strange noise. It sounded like someone was in my living room. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and a baseball bat I still kept by my bed. Slowly, I crept down the hallway. The living room was dark, but I could make out a figure moving near the window. I flipped on the light, ready to swing. It was Dan. He spun around, eyes wild. In his hands were more cameras. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, gripping the bat tighter. He just smiled, a creepy, unsettling smile. "I'll always find you," he said. "You can't hide from me." I ran back to my room and locked the door, calling 911. By the time the police arrived, Dan was gone. But he left the cameras behind. The police took it seriously this time. They put out an APB on Dan and stationed a car outside my apartment. But he seemed to have vanished into thin air. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every shadow made me jump. I started seeing Dan everywhere. In the grocery store, on the street, outside my window. But when I looked again, he was never there. My friend suggested I leave town for a while, get away until they caught Dan. I agreed, packing a bag and booking a flight to my parents' house across the country. At the airport, I kept looking over my shoulder, sure I'd see Dan following me. But I made it onto the plane without incident. As we took off, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Maybe now I could relax. 6 hours later, I was collecting my bag of the carousel when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. My blood ran cold as I opened it. It was a picture of me asleep on the plane. The message read, "Sweet dreams. See you soon." I spun around, searching the crowded airport. Was he here? How had he known where I was going? That's when I saw him. Dan was standing by the exit, smiling and waving at me. Before I could react, he turned and disappeared into the crowd. I ran after him, pushing past annoyed travelers. When I got outside, he was nowhere to be seen. A car peeled out of the pickup area, and I caught a glimpse of Dan in the passenger seat. Shaking, I called the local police. They took my statement but didn't seem too concerned. Just another domestic dispute to them. My parents picked me up, worried sick after I told them what happened. They insisted I stay with them, promising to keep me safe. But as I settled into my old bedroom that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Dan had found me once. He'd find me again. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what his next move would be, wondering if I'd ever truly be free of him. As I finally started to drift off, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "Good night. Sweet dreams in your childhood bed. Don't worry, I'll be watching over you." I shot up, heart pounding. How did he know where I was sleeping? I ran to the window, half expecting to see him standing in the yard. But there was no one there, just the quiet, dark street. And me, alone with the knowledge that no matter where I went, Dan would be watching, waiting, planning his next move. I thought I finally escaped my ex, Bella. Blocking her on everything, deleting social media, and moving to a new city seemed like overkill at the time, but I needed a clean break. For months, life was good. I made new friends, started a job I loved, and began to forget the chaos Bella had brought into my life. Then the gifts started showing up. The first one appeared on a random Tuesday. I nearly stepped on the small package as I left for work. Inside was a smooth, flat stone, the same kind Bella and I had skipped across the lake on our first date. My stomach churned. I tossed the stone in the trash and tried to shake off the uneasy feeling. A week later, another package arrived. This time, it contained a worn copy of The Great Gatsby, a book I'd once mentioned loving in passing. I hadn't thought about that conversation in years. How did she remember? More importantly, how did she know where I lived? I called the police, but they weren't much help. No threatening note, no proof it was actually from Bella. They suggested I install a security camera and keep a record of any future incidents. The gifts kept coming. A t-shirt I thought I'd lost years ago. A CD from a band I'd recently started listening to. Each item felt like a message. "I'm watching you. I know everything about you. You can't escape me. Paranoia set in. I checked over my shoulder constantly, convinced I'd spot Bella lurking nearby. I stopped going out with my new friends, afraid she might be following me. At work, I jumped every time my phone buzzed, dreading another sign that she'd found me. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to confront Bella. I had unblocked her number and called. To my surprise, she answered on the first ring. Her confusion seemed genuine when I mentioned the gifts. If it wasn't Bella who was sending them, who else knew so much about me? I hung up without another word, more unsettled than ever. The next day, I installed extra locks on my doors and windows. I started varying my routine, taking different routes to work, shopping at new stores. But the gifts kept coming, always waiting on my doorstep when I least expected them. My nerves were shot. I barely slept, jumping at every sound. My work started to suffer. My new friends stopped calling, put off by my constant anxiety and cancellations. Then came the photo. It showed me sleeping in my bed, clearly taken from inside my apartment. On the back, a note read, "You look so peaceful when you sleep." That was it. I packed a bag and checked into a hotel across town. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. But even at the hotel, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hotel staff gave me odd looks as I peered around corners and jumped at shadows. On my second night there, I returned to my room to find a familiar package waiting on the bed. Inside was a key, the spare key of my apartment that I kept hidden under a loose brick outside. The note read, "Come home. I miss you." My hands shook as I called the police again. This time, they took me seriously. They swept my apartment but found no signs of forced entry. They dusted for fingerprints and installed a temporary camera, promising to keep an eye out. For a week, nothing happened. No packages, no signs of intrusion. I started to relax, thinking maybe the police presence had scared off my stalker. Then late one night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Look outside." Heart pounding, I approached the window. At first, I saw nothing in the dark street below. Then a figure stepped into the glow of a streetlight. It was Bella. My breath caught in my throat. How had she found me? I watched as she raised her hand, waving slowly, a smile visible even from this distance. Without thinking, I raced down the stairs and out onto the street. But when I reached the spot where Bella had been standing, she was gone. In her place was another package. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a small velvet box. My heart sank as I recognized it. The ring I'd planned to propose to Bella with before everything fell apart. I'd returned it to the jeweler months ago. As I stared at the ring, my mind raced. How could Bella have gotten this? And how did she always seem to know where I was? I decided to set a trap. I told only one person, my closest friend at work, that I was planning to move again. I gave her a fake address, saying I'd be there in 3 days. On the third day, I staked out the fake address. For hours, nothing happened. Then, just as I was about to give up, a familiar car pulled up. But it wasn't Bella who got out. It was my coworker, the only person I told about the move. She walked up to the door, a package in her hands. I watched, stunned, as she placed it on the doorstep and turned to leave. I stepped out of my hiding place, confronting her. She froze, caught in the act. The story came tumbling out, how she'd become obsessed with me, how she'd hired a private investigator to follow me, how she'd been the one sending the gifts all along. She'd even gone so far as to track down Bella, convincing her to play along that night I saw her on the street. It was all an elaborate plan to make me feel unsafe, to make me turn to her for comfort and support. As she spoke, I felt a mix of relief and horror. The mystery was solved, but the betrayal cut deep. I trusted her, confided in her, and all along she'd been the one tormenting me. I called the police, and they arrived quickly to take her away. As I watched the patrol car drive off, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was over, but I knew the paranoia and fear wouldn't fade overnight. I walked back to my real apartment, my mind reeling. I had a lot to process, a lot to work through. But for the first time in months, I felt I could breathe again. I was safe. I was free. As I reached my door, I noticed something. A small package sitting innocently on the welcome mat. My heart raced as I picked it up, wondering if this ordeal wasn't over after all. But when I opened it, I found only a note inside. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find peace. Bella." I smiled, feeling the last of my fear melt away. It was time to truly start over, to reclaim my life. And this time I was ready for whatever came next. Dating someone new was supposed to be exciting, not terrifying. But here I am, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at every notification on my phone. It all started a few weeks after I began seeing Mark. We met through mutual friends and hit it off right away. He was kind, funny, and nothing like my ex Tom. I thought I'd finally moved on from that toxic relationship. Then the weird messages started. At first, it was just odd comments on my social media posts from accounts I didn't recognize. It seemed to know things about my day that I hadn't shared publicly. I brushed it off as coincidence. But it got worse. I started getting direct messages with creepy details about my life. What I wore that day. Where I'd been for lunch. Even conversations I'd had in private. It was like someone was watching my every move. I changed all my passwords and tightened my privacy settings. But somehow the messages kept coming. That's when I realized my accounts must have been hacked. The final straw was when I got a message saying, "I see you with him. You'll regret this." My blood ran cold. There was only one person who could be behind this. Tom. Our relationship had ended badly. He was controlling and manipulative, always trying to isolate me from friends and family. When I finally got the courage to leave, he didn't take it well. There were angry calls and texts for weeks. But eventually it stopped and I thought he'd moved on. Clearly I was wrong. I didn't want to worry Mark, so I kept quiet about what was happening. But it was getting harder to hide my anxiety. I flinched every time my phone buzzed. I was constantly scanning crowds, afraid I'd see Tom's face. Then things escalated from the digital world to real life. I started noticing a car following me home from work. Flowers appeared on my doorstep with no note. Once, I could have sworn I saw someone duck behind a tree when I looked out my window. I was terrified but didn't know what to do. I had no proof it was Tom. And even if I did, what could the police really do? He hadn't directly threatened me. I felt trapped and alone. One night, I was leaving a restaurant with Mark when I saw a familiar figure across the street. It was Tom staring right at us. Mark noticed my sudden panic and asked what was wrong. That's when I broke down and told him everything. Mark was supportive but worried. He suggested I go to the police, but I was scared that would only make Tom angrier. Instead, we came up with a plan to gather evidence. We set up hidden cameras around my apartment and installed tracking software on my phone. Mark helped me document every strange occurrence. Slowly, we built a case. But Tom must have sensed something was up. The messages and sightings suddenly stopped. Just when I thought maybe it was over, I got one final message. "You can't hide from me forever." I was done being scared. With Mark's encouragement, I decided to confront Tom. But on my terms, I arranged to meet him in a public place with Mark and a friend nearby for backup. Seeing Tom face to face after all this time was surreal. He tried to act like nothing had happened, but I wasn't having it. I laid out everything I knew and told him to stay out of my life for good. He denied it all at first, but when I mentioned going to the police, his demeanor changed. He got angry, then pleading. It was clear he wasn't the person I thought I knew. I walked away feeling stronger, but it wasn't over. Tom's behavior became more erratic. He started showing up at my workplace, sending packages to my home. Each time, we documented it and reported it to the police. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone trying to break in. I called Mark and the police in a panic. By the time they arrived, the intruder was gone, but they found evidence it was Tom. The police finally had enough to arrest him. I thought it was over, but Tom made bail. He disappeared, and I lived in constant fear, not knowing where he might pop up next. Mark suggested I stay with him for a while, but I refused to let Tom control my life any longer. Instead, I took self-defense classes and installed a top-notch security system. Weeks went by with no sign of Tom. I started to relax, thinking maybe he'd finally given up. But I was wrong. One evening, I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, I called Mark and told him to call the police. Against my better judgment, I went inside. The place was trash. Photos of me and Mark were torn up, furniture overturned. And there, sitting calmly in the middle of the chaos, was Tom. He looked different, wild-eyed, and disheveled. He started rambling about how we were meant to be together, how he'd been watching over me. I tried to keep him talking, stalling for time until help arrived. But Tom realized what I was doing. He lunged at me, and suddenly we were struggling. All those self-defense classes kicked in, and I fought back with everything I had. I managed to break free and run for the door, but Tom caught up. Just as he grabbed me, Mark burst in, followed closely by the police. In the chaos that followed, Tom tried to escape but was quickly subdued. As they led him away in handcuffs, he kept shouting that he'd done it all for me, that we belonged together. The aftermath was a blur of police statements and court appearances. Tom was eventually sentenced to prison, and I got a permanent restraining order. It took time, but I slowly rebuilt my life. I moved to a new apartment, changed my phone number, and started fresh social media accounts. Mark stood by me through it all, his unwavering support a constant reminder that not all relationships are toxic. Now, months later, I'm finally starting to feel safe again. But I'll never forget the lesson I learned: trust your instincts and never be afraid to ask for help. My story could have had a very different ending if I'd stayed silent. As for Tom, he's where he belongs, behind bars. And me, I'm free, stronger than ever, and ready to write the next chapter of my life on my own terms. I met Jake at a local coffee shop. We clicked instantly, and after a few months of dating, we decided to move in together. Our new apartment downtown seemed perfect, a fresh start for both of us. The first week was amazing. We unpacked, decorated, and settled into our new routine. But then weird things started happening. I'd hear footsteps upstairs when Jake was at work. Objects would move slightly when I wasn't looking. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination running wild in a new place. But the strange occurrences kept piling up. One day, I noticed a mug in the sink that neither Jake nor I had used. Another time, I could have sworn I saw a shadow dart across the hallway. I started to feel on edge, like someone was watching me. I didn't want to worry Jake or seem paranoid, so I kept my concerns to myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started checking the locks obsessively and jumping at every little noise. Then came the day I found the box. I was cleaning out a closet when I stumbled upon a cardboard box tucked away in the back. Curious, I opened it and felt my blood run cold. Inside were photos, trinkets, and letters, all belonging to my ex, Freddie. Freddie and I had a volatile relationship that ended badly. He became possessive and controlling, so I broke things off. He didn't take it well, stalking me for weeks until I threatened to call the police. I thought I'd finally gotten rid of him, but now his things were in my new apartment. My mind raced. How did Freddie's stuff get here? Had he broken in? Was he still watching me? I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to tell Jake, but I was afraid he'd think I was crazy or that I was still hung up on my ex. Over the next few days, I was a nervous wreck. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I heard someone moving around upstairs. During the day, I'd obsessively check every room, closet, and corner. Jake noticed my strange behavior and kept asking if I was okay. I'd lie and say I was just stressed about work, but I couldn't keep up the charade forever. One evening, while Jake was working late, I heard a loud thump from the attic. By heart pounding, I grabbed a tennis racket for protection and crept up the stairs. With shaking hands, I opened the attic door. What I saw made my blood run cold. There in the dim light was a makeshift living space. A sleeping bag, some snacks, and a laptop were arranged in one corner. And worst of all, pinned to the wall were dozens of photos of me, recent ones taken since I'd moved in with Jake. I backed away in horror, my mind reeling. Freddie had been living in our attic this whole time, spying on us. I ran downstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and called the police with trembling fingers. The next few hours were a blur. Police swarmed the apartment. Jake came home confused and worried, and I broke down sobbing as I explained everything. The officers searched the attic, but Freddie was gone. He'd slipped away when he heard me coming. In the days that followed, I was a mess. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and jumped at every sound. Jake was supportive, but I could tell he was freaked out too. We installed security cameras and changed all the locks, but I still didn't feel safe. The police searched for Freddie, but he seemed to have vanished into thin air. I kept expecting him to pop up somewhere to continue his twisted game of cat and mouse. Every stranger on the street became a potential threat in my mind. Jake suggested we move, but I was determined not to let Freddie win. This was our home, and I refused to be chased out of it. Slowly, with therapy and time, I started to feel more secure. We turned the attic into a bright, cheerful art studio, erasing any trace of Freddie's presence. Months passed without incident. I began to relax, to enjoy my life with Jake again. But there was always a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a wariness that never quite went away. I'd catch myself checking the attic door, just to make sure it was locked. One night, I woke up to a strange noise. Jake was sound asleep beside me, but I could hear rustling coming from downstairs. My heart raced as I crept out of bed, grabbing my phone to call the police. As I tiptoed down the stairs, I saw a figure in the kitchen. It was Freddy, rummaging through our fridge like he belonged there. I froze, unsure what to do. He hadn't noticed me yet. Suddenly, he turned and saw me. His eyes widened and narrowed. "I'd maybe come back to me," he whispered, taking a step towards me. I bolted for the front door, but Freddy was faster. He grabbed my arm, spinning me around. "We belong together," he hissed. "I've been watching you, waiting for the right moment." I struggled against his grip, my mind racing. I needed to get away to wake Jake to do something. In a burst of adrenaline, I kneed Freddy in the groin and broke free. I ran upstairs, screaming for Jake. Freddy was right behind me, his face contorted with rage. Jake appeared in the hallway, confused and groggy. When he saw Freddy, his eyes widened in shock. What happened next was chaos. Jake lunged at Freddy, tackling him to the ground. They wrestled, trading punches and grunts. I stood frozen, unsure how to help. Freddy managed to break free, shoving Jake against the wall. He turned to me, his eyes wild. "If I can't have you, no one can," he snarled, reaching into his pocket. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the glint of a knife in Freddy's hand. Jake was struggling to his feet. I knew I had to act. Without thinking, I grabbed a heavy lamp from the nearby table and swung it at Freddy's head. There was a sickening crack, and he crumpled to the floor. The next few minutes were a blur. Jake called the police while I stood over Freddy's unconscious body, lamp still in hand. When the cops arrived, they handcuffed Freddy and took him away. As the adrenaline wore off, I started shaking uncontrollably. Jake held me close, murmuring words of comfort. It was really over this time. In the weeks that followed, we learned that Freddy had been living in various hiding spots around the neighborhood, always keeping tabs on me. He'd been planning to kidnap me, convinced we were meant to be together. The trial was difficult, but seeing Freddy led away in handcuffs felt like closing a chapter of my life. Jake and I decided to stay in our apartment, refusing to let Freddy's actions drive us out. We've made new memories here, happy ones that outweigh the bad. I still have moments of fear, but they're getting fewer and farther between. I'm stronger now, more aware of my surroundings. Jake and I are closer than ever, having faced this nightmare together. We're planning our future, talking about marriage and kids. But one thing's for sure, our next place definitely won't have an attic. It had been 15 years since graduation, and even longer since our messy breakup. But there she was, looking almost the same as I remembered her. At first, I was nervous. Our relationship had been intense, to say the least. We were young and in love, but it quickly turned toxic. Sabrina was possessive, always accusing me of cheating or flirting with other girls. It got so bad that I had to end things, which didn't go over well. But when I saw her at the reunion, she seemed different. Calmer, more mature. We started chatting, and it felt like old times. She asked about my life, and I told her about my job, my travels, and my new girlfriend, Emma. That's when things started to get weird. Sabrina's eyes narrowed when I mentioned Emma, and she quickly changed the subject. I brushed it off, thinking I was imagining things. As the night went on, I noticed Sabrina watching me. Every time I talked to another woman, she'd appear at my side, inserting herself into the conversation. She kept touching my arm, laughing too loud at my jokes. It was like she was marking her territory. I tried to keep my distance, but Sabrina always found a way to be near me. She cornered me by the punch bowl, asking if I ever thought about what could have been between us. I politely shut her down, reminding her that I was happy with Emma. That's when I saw a flash of the old Sabrina. Her eyes went cold, and she hissed, "She'll never love you like I did." Before I could respond, she plastered on a fake smile and walked away. I was rattled, but I tried to shake it off. I decided to call it a night and headed to the parking lot. As I approached my car, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Sabrina was there, running her hand along Emma's car. She looked up at me and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Nice car," she said. "It would be a shame if something happened to it." I felt a chill run down my spine. This was the Sabrina I remembered, the one who would do anything to keep me. I suddenly remembered all the times she accidentally broken things I cared about when we were dating. I tried to reason with her, telling her that our relationship was in the past, but Sabrina wasn't listening. She started ranting about how we were meant to be together, how no one could love me like she did. That's when she dropped the bombshell. "Remember that night at the lake house?" she asked. I never told anyone what really happened. My heart stopped. The lake house. It was where we'd gone for a weekend getaway during our senior year. It was also where our relationship had taken a dark turn. We had a huge fight that night. Sabrina had found texts from another girl on my phone and flew into a rage. She'd started throwing things, screaming that if she couldn't have me, no one could. In the chaos, she knocked over a candle, starting a small fire. We'd managed to put it out, but not before it had caused some damage. We'd sworn never to tell anyone, afraid of getting in trouble. But now Sabrina was threatening to expose everything. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You," she said simply. "Break up with Emma or I'll tell everyone what we did." I felt sick. I knew Sabrina was unstable, but I never thought she'd go this far. I tried to reason with her, to explain that blackmail wouldn't make me love her, but she wouldn't listen. As I drove home that night, my mind was racing. I knew I had to tell Emma everything, but I was terrified of losing her. And what if Sabrina made good on her threats? The next few weeks were a nightmare. Sabrina started showing up everywhere. My workplace, my favorite coffee shop, even outside my apartment. She'd send me dozens of texts a day, alternating between declarations of love and angry threats. I finally broke down and told Emma everything. To my surprise, she was understanding. She was angry about the lie, but she could see how scared I was of Sabrina. Together, we decided to go to the police. But when we went to file a report, the police said they couldn't do much without more evidence. They advised us to document everything and come back if Sabrina made any direct threats. Frustrated and scared, Emma and I decided to take matters into our own hands. We set up cameras around our apartment and started recording all of Sabrina's calls and messages. One night, about a month after the reunion, I woke up to the sound of breaking glass. I rushed to the living room to find Sabrina standing there, a brick at her feet and shards of window glass scattered around her. She looked wild, her hair a mess and her eyes unfocused. "If I can't have you, no one can," she screamed, echoing her words from that night at the lake house. I tried to calm her down, but she lunged at me with something glinting in her hand. I realized with horror that it was a knife. Emma, awakened by the commotion, ran into the room. Seeing the scene before her, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed a lamp and swung it at Sabrina, knocking her off balance. In the chaos that followed, I managed to disarm Sabrina and pin her down until the police arrived. As they led her away in handcuffs, she kept screaming that she loved me, that we were meant to be together. The lake house incident, it turned out, was worse than I remembered. Sabrina had intentionally started the fire, hoping to trap us both inside. She convinced herself that if we died together, we'd be together forever. As Sabrina was led away to face charges of stalking, breaking, and entering an attempt of assault, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Part of me would always care for the girl I'd once loved, but I knew this was for the best. Emma squeezed my hand as we watched the police car drive away. "It's over," she said softly. But even as I nodded, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't really over. Sabrina's words echoed in my mind. "If I can't have you, no one can." I had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning of a long and terrifying ordeal. Melon and I had been together for 2 years, but things weren't working out. I thought we ended on decent terms. Boy, was I wrong. A week later, my mom called. She was upset, asking why I'd done such horrible things to Melon. I had no clue what she meant. Turns out, Melon told her I'd been emotionally abusive throughout our relationship. She claimed I isolated her from friends, put her down constantly, and even threatened her. I was shocked. None of it was true. Sure, we argued, but I'd never abused her. I tried explaining this to my mom, but she didn't believe me. Melon had always been sweet around her. She couldn't imagine her lying about something so serious. Over the next few days, more people reached out. Friends, coworkers, even my boss. They'd all heard Melon's stories. Some were angry, others disappointed. A few cut ties completely. I felt like I was going crazy. How could everyone believe these lies? I decided to confront Melon directly. Big mistake. She played the victim perfectly, acting scared and telling me to leave her alone. A neighbor saw and threatened to call the cops if I didn't back off. I left, feeling helpless and frustrated. Things only got worse from there. I started noticing weird stuff happening. My apartment door was unlocked one day when I got home from work. Another time, I found my car scratched up in the parking lot. Small things, but unsettling. Then came the photos. Someone sent an anonymous email to my work with pictures of bruises on Melon's arms and legs. The email claimed I'd done it. I nearly lost my job over that one. I knew the photos were fake or staged, but how could I prove it? I felt like I was losing my mind. Everywhere I went, people whispered and stared. Old friends crossed the street to avoid me. My family barely spoke to me anymore. I was becoming a pariah in my own life. That's when I realized Melon wasn't just spreading lies. She was actively framing me. The unlocked door, the car damage, it was all her. She was trying to make me look unstable and dangerous. I needed evidence to clear my name, but I had to be careful. If Melon caught on to what I was doing, who knows what she might do next. I started documenting everything. I set up cameras in my apartment and car. I saved every text, email, and voicemail related to the situation. One night, I caught a break. My camera recorded Melon breaking into my apartment. She rummaged through my stuff, planted what looked like drugs in a drawer, then left. I finally had proof. But it wasn't enough. I needed more to counteract all the evidence she created against me. I dug deeper, tracing back through our relationship. I found old messages where she threatened to ruin me if I ever left her. I'd brushed it off as a joke at the time, but now it was chilling. I uncovered more. Fake social media accounts she'd made to harass herself and blame me. Receipts for makeup she'd used to create those bruises in the photos. It was like unraveling a massive, twisted plan. The whole time I felt like I was in a horror movie. Every shadow made me jump. Every phone call could be more bad news. I barely slept, always waiting for the next shoe to drop. Finally, I took everything I'd gathered to the police. At first, they were skeptical. Melon had already painted me as an abuser in their eyes, but the evidence was overwhelming. They had to investigate. The investigation took weeks. Every day was agony. I lost weight, couldn't focus at work, and barely left my apartment except when necessary. The fear and stress were consuming me. One day, I got a call from the detective handling my case. They found something big. Turns out Melon had done this before. Her ex before me had gone through a similar ordeal. He'd moved away and changed his name to escape the fallout. The detective had managed to track him down, and he was willing to testify. With this new information, things started moving quickly. The police brought Melon in for questioning. Under pressure, she started to crack. Her story wasn't adding up, and she couldn't explain away all the evidence I'd gathered. Just when I thought it was all over, Melon made one last desperate move. She showed up at my workplace, hysterical and claiming I was threatening her. Security cameras caught her planting a knife in my desk drawer before she started screaming for help. Luckily, the police were already on their way. They'd been monitoring Melon since bringing her in for questioning. They arrived just in time to catch her in the act. Melon was arrested on the spot. The charges piled up: filing false reports, breaking and entering, harassment, attempted framing, and more. It was surreal watching her being led away in handcuffs, still trying to play the victim. In the aftermath, I felt a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. The nightmare was over, but the effects lingered. Some people apologized for believing Melon's lies. Others still seemed unsure, like they couldn't quite let go of the doubts she planted. I decided to take some time off work to process everything. One evening, as I was going through old photos, deciding which ones to keep and which to toss, I found something strange. In the background of a picture from early in our relationship, I spotted Melon. She was looking directly at the camera with an expression I'd never noticed before. It was cold, calculating, almost predatory. A chill ran down my spine as I realized this might have been her plan all along. The next day, I got an unexpected visitor. It was Melon's ex, the one who testified. He looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. He told me Melon had been released on bail. Her family had money, good lawyers. He warned me to be careful, said she might not be done yet. Just as he was leaving, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This isn't over. I froze, showing the message to Melon's ex. His face went pale. "Change your locks," he said. "Better yet, move now." As I watched him hurry away, I realized this nightmare might not be over after all. Melon was out there, angry and desperate, and I had no idea what she might do next. I thought I was finally free of Brandon after our messy breakup. For a few blissful weeks, I enjoyed the peace of single life. No more arguments, no more walking on eggshells. I was starting to feel like myself again. Then the text started. At first, just a hey here and there. I ignored them, hoping Brandon would get the hint. But they kept coming, getting more frequent and pushy. Why are you ignoring me? We need to talk. I blocked his number, but somehow the messages still got through. When I saw Brandon's name pop up with an incoming call, my stomach dropped. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice sounded confused when I demanded to know why he was harassing me. He insisted he hadn't contacted me at all since we broke up. I wanted to believe him. He seemed genuinely perplexed. But if it wasn't him who was sending all these messages? The text took a darker turn after that call. Whoever was sending them clearly knew intimate details about our relationship and my life. They referenced inside jokes and brought up painful memories. The messages became threatening, saying things like, I'm always watching you, and you'll never be rid of me. I was terrified to leave my apartment. Every notification made me jump. I changed my number. Somehow they found the new one within days. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I imagining things? Was it really Brandon all along playing some sick game? In desperation, I reached out to Brandon's sister. She confirmed he'd been out of town for work recently, during the exact time frame I'd been receiving the worst messages. A bit of relief washed over me. At least I wasn't going crazy thinking it wasn't actually him. But that relief was short-lived as I realized someone else must be behind this. Someone who knew way too much about me and my relationship with Brandon. The idea that a stranger was stalking and terrorizing me was almost worse than thinking it was my ex. I went to the police, but they weren't much help. Without concrete evidence of a threat, there wasn't much they could do. I felt utterly alone and unsafe. Paranoia crept in. I started suspecting everyone around me. Was it a mutual friend? A coworker? I became a hermit, too scared to trust anyone. My work suffered as I missed deadlines and meetings. Friends stopped reaching out when I continuously blew them off. The isolation only made things worse. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I got a text that chilled me to the bone. Look out your window. Heart pounding, I peeked through the curtains. There was Brandon standing on the sidewalk, phone in hand. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The out-of-town alibi, the confusion when I confronted him, it had all been an act. Brandon had been gaslighting me this whole time, making me doubt my own sanity while he tormented me from afar. I called the police immediately. This time, I had proof. Brandon was violating the restraining order I'd gotten after our breakup. They arrived quickly and arrested him. As they put him in the squad car, I saw a smirk on his face that made my blood run cold. The next few weeks were a blur of police interviews and court appearances. It came out that Brandon had been using a combination of burner phones and spoofing apps to send the messages and disguise his number. He'd also hacked into my accounts to gather information and track my whereabouts. The judge didn't go easy on him. Brandon was sentenced to jail time and ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation. I felt relieved, but I knew the ordeal wasn't truly over. The paranoia and anxiety wouldn't disappear overnight. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A month after Brandon's sentencing, the messages started again. Same pattern. Innocent at first, then escalating quickly. I panicked, thinking Brandon had somehow found a way to continue his harassment from jail. I called the detective who'd handled my case. She assured me Brandon was still locked up, with no access to phones or the internet. So who was behind these new messages? The answer came in a way I never expected. I was grabbing coffee with a friend when my phone buzzed with another threatening text. My friend glanced at the screen and went pale. She recognized the writing style. It was eerily similar to her ex-boyfriend's, a guy I'd never met. It turns out her ex and Brandon had been cellmates for a brief time before Brandon's trial. They'd bonded over their crazy exes and shared stories. When Brandon got sentenced, he'd asked his new friend to continue tormenting me on his behalf. I felt sick. The stranger had access to all the intimate details Brandon knew about me, and he was clearly just as unhinged as my ex. The police took it more seriously this time. They tracked down the ex's location and found evidence linking him to the messages. He was arrested, and Brandon faced additional charges for orchestrating the continued harassment. But the damage was done. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even with both men behind bars. I jumped at every sound, flinched at every notification. Trust felt impossible. I knew I needed to reclaim my life, but how? I couldn't keep living in fear. That's when I decided to take control. I enrolled in self-defense classes, beefed up my home security, and started seeing a therapist specializing in trauma. I changed my phone number, email, and social media accounts. I even moved to a new apartment in a secure building. Slowly, I started to feel safer. I reconnected with friends and family, forcing myself to be social even when anxiety tried to hold me back. Each day felt a little easier than the last. Then came the ultimate test. I got a job offer in another city, a fresh start, far away from the memories and fear that lingered here. It was terrifying to consider uprooting my life, but also exhilarating. As I packed up my apartment, I found an old photo of Brandon and me. Looking at his face, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I'd survived his worst, and I was stronger for it. I tossed the photo in the trash and closed the box. Tomorrow, I'd be on a plane to my new life. Brandon and his twisted games were part of my past. The future was wide open, full of possibilities I couldn't wait to explore. For the first time in months, I felt truly free. Whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. I was ready to write a new chapter, one where I was the author of my own story.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.